Today's guest is Janice Cohen Coram, and it's a hyphenated name, which is new because she just got married. And she was 53 when she got married, 54 now. And yeah, so it's very recent. She's still on her honeymoon, and we really hit it off because we have a lot in common. She rekindled with her now husband that she first met 27 years prior. So that is so cool. I love those stories. And so I was really excited to talk to her, not only about what she does, but yeah, her whole love story, which is super fun to talk about. I always like to give late in life examples of love. And yeah, she's intuitive. So she has a lot of skills in that area. And she talks about what she does, how she came upon this later in life, and how, what she does. Even shared a cool story. So I got actually chills twice while I was talking to her, one full body chills and the second like half body chills, but still I don't get chills every time I talk to somebody. So that was so cool. But she's a licensed therapist. She's been a licensed therapist for over 30 years. And she also has a book called The Intuitive Therapist. I want to mention that because we didn't talk about that till the very end of the episode. But it's written for therapists, coaches, and counselors to help them accelerate and empower their clinical practices with the wisdom of their intuition, which is amazing. You imagine if you have a therapist and the therapist can connect to guides, spiritual guides, and the beyond, and people that were in your life that are no longer with us, and they can help you in your therapy session. That is so amazing. She also has a podcast called The Intuitive Therapist, so same name. And so she is super interesting. She has a dog and a cat, and she lives in Georgia, and her cat makes an appearance if you watch me on my YouTube video. So my dog was at my feet and her cat was on her desk. But yeah, it was a great conversation and I loved talking to her, and I think you're going to enjoy listening in on our conversation. So without further ado, here she is. Welcome to another episode of Living Your Spark Second Half. And I have with me today Janice Cohen Coram. She has a hyphenated name because she just got married. And of course, we're going to talk about that juicy love story. Yes. So yeah, we're late in life. Well, I don't even know if it was a remarriage, but you can talk about that. So welcome.
Thank you, thank you. So glad to be here.
You're so
So
glad.
glad.
Yes, yes. So Janice and I are in the same mastermind. I meet a lot of people that I have on my podcast that way. I just love it so much. But unfortunately, she missed the last in-person one because she was busy getting married. Such a good reason to
Yes.
miss it. So why don't you just introduce yourself? What do you do? She's into the woo-woo, so I love talking to people about this stuff. So yeah, share what you do.
Well, I have been a therapist for over 30 years, became the intuitive therapist. That's how people know me. In 2008, when my gifts opened up, when I turned 40, they just kind of opened up. And so everything in my life changed with that. How I worked with clients, the things that I developed, my channeling, mediumship, all of that. So I'm a therapist by trade and a clairvoyant empath and medium. And so I combine the two, hence the intuitive therapist piece.
All right,
But
all
what
right, all
I
right.
love,
I'm on the edge of
yeah,
my seat. You said my
yes,
gifts opened up.
my
And
gifts opened up. Yeah.
that's what I want people to know, that it's possible.
Oh, for sure.
So what
For
can you
sure.
describe how that felt and what that looked like?
Yeah. I believe as I look back, I was always an empathic person. And I struggled a lot. And back in the 70s, when I was in school, they didn't know about anything spiritual or that energetic sensitivities existed. So it was a constant struggle, but nobody knew enough to tell me, hey, this is what's going on. So over time, probably about 25, I didn't realize it at the time. I was guided to get a tarot deck. I started to learn about spirituality. And so I started with the tarot deck and pulling cards and then reading books and then studying this content. And then eventually I started to do readings kind of in secret with people because I didn't feel very confident at the time. And they were kind of spot on. So So that was right around when I hit 40. All of a sudden, I'm like channeling, I'm connecting with my guides. I'm working very closely with angels and archangels and deities and channeling dead people.
That is
And so I'm
crazy.
like, holy mackerel, what is going on? And so thankfully I had over time met women in, in my tribe, right? And so I was able to learn from them what exactly was all of this. And it was literally, I had a dear friend who is a hand analysis specialist look at my hand and say, yep, here it is in your hand. This is the 40-year mark. It was destined that your gifts opened up.
Oh,
But
chill body, full body chills.
yeah. And so by history with all my lifetimes, I had been very gifted, healer, channeler, all of this stuff, medicine woman. And it was time in this lifetime to embody that. And so
Wow.
once that happened, everything changed in my life. It was like I couldn't be who I was anymore. I could feel things that other people didn't feel, see, hear, know things that would just come to me. And so my private practice also changed. I began to really help women um, make leaps and bounds in literally between 10 and 30 minutes to an hour that they would spend in therapy prison 5, 10 years, 20 years working with a therapist and make no progress. And I say that humbly because I knew it wasn't me. Yes, it was, but it was coming
Mm.
through me. And
Or
so the
Esther Hicks, she's like
yes, yeah, she channels
channels.
entities
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
that's
Yeah, she
crazy.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and
can you I think some of my audience is like me before I started getting into the woo woo and empath. So people throw that name around a lot or that role or identity around like I'm an empath and so can you describe what that means?
an empath is someone who senses energy in all ways, whether it's through hearing, seeing, feeling, knowing. For example, an empath will walk into a room and feel the energy. An empath will be around people and get a sense of exactly who they are with no words spoken. An empath can just really just feels things very deeply,
Yeah,
right?
I've also
So,
heard that they can like if they're around somebody really sad, they take on that
oh
sadness
yeah, yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's empaths are like sponges,
Yeah.
and we are so open. We're such open vessels that we pick up everything. I mean, I struggle with that majority of my life. Really try not to take on other people's energies, and I did that a lot before I even knew what that was. So I've become much better at not doing that. And even astrologically, when the planets change, and when there's solar flares or geomagnetic storms, or the entire world is feeling something, we feel it,
Mm.
and it's very hard to distinguish between what belongs externally and doesn't belong to you and what's yours until you
Yes.
get to really know yourself. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
empaths, we just take everything on. And it can really feel overwhelming, exhausting, and fatiguing,
Yeah.
and all of that. And we can feel like it's really just a curse rather than a blessing.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you feel other people's feelings, know that that could be your superpower.
It is. There's no question. You just got to learn how to hone it and learn how to respect it, and learn how to manage your energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So you started using it in your practice.
Yeah.
You're getting older. So did you start thinking like, is this all I want to do? Because I'm sure in some ways, traditional therapy limits you.
Oh, yeah, traditional therapy is processing things to death and just talking. And the way that I work is I say this prayer, and it's basically I ask that the session or the reading or the channeling that I'm about to do uh, be clear, specific, and accurate, and bring blessings to everyone involved. I ask that my higher mind remain in charge and my ego move out of the way, so that I can see, hear, feel, and know the divine messages you'd like to come through. So I literally become very, very open, and whatever comes through is meant to be because they give me the exact words in the exact way with the exact vibration that will create change. So, and when I say they, I work with my client's spirit guide team and my spirit guide team and spirit, and I call it this collective wisdom. And so it's not it's incorporating not only the 30 years of the actual clinical expertise that I have, but also the insight. And I happen to be a therapist that doesn't believe in therapy prison. I think if you're in therapy for and you haven't made progress at least within a year, either you're not doing the work or you're with the wrong person. And if you're in
Yes.
therapy for 5, 10, 20 years, all you're doing is yammering. And I
Yeah.
speak very directly, and spirit uses me very, very directly. And so it's become a very, very integral part of how I do my work. It's just, I couldn't ever go back to who I used to be before 2008.
Yeah, I love that because I was in marriage counseling twice in my previous marriage through over the course of like we had marriage counseling after we married 6 years and then 16 years. So I don't know what it, and then we got divorced at 26. So I don't know what it is with the sixes, but
Yeah. Yeah.
triple sixes, you know what that's all about. But anyways, so I remember, and it might have been the first person we saw that he said, if you are still with me in X amount of time, then I'm not doing my job. And I always really respected him for that. And it
Mm-hmm.
did work. I mean, both times it worked. And yeah, so there was just too much in the end that couldn't
Sure.
counseling couldn't have helped. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I love that you say that because I totally agree.
Yeah. It's so important for people to know. It's like, therapy is doing the work.
Yeah.
But the insights that come through, it's fascinating for me. I've been doing this for a very long time, and every single time I could never plan what comes through, and it hits at just the right moment. Boom, massive shifts. I
Yeah.
love it. It's
That's
just
so good.
freaking
That's so
amazing.
good.
Yeah,
It makes me
yeah,
think about a car. And when your car has a problem, you take it in to get fixed. And you don't want somebody who like keeps breaking your car or not that they're doing the braking, but like you want your car to be fixed for a good while. And then when it has another problem, you go back in, but you don't want to be in there every
sure,
week with your car.
exactly, exactly. I'm
Yeah.
with you. Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me, I want to hear about your love story. So how did
Oh,
you
I love
reconnect?
this.
I mean, I'm sure there's some people that would love to find love again in life and might think it's not
Yes.
possible for them. So did you have a
Yeah.
marriage earlier? Were you in a relationship you probably
No, I
no?
I had been engaged twice in my 30s, and then just dated different people over time until, and I'll tell you the story. I love this story about us, and it's just the true story. Until we reconnected last year.
Oh, reconnected.
So,
We're reconnectees too. So
oh, are you? That's
yeah. And my
fantastic.
husband
It's
never got married. So he was 52 when he married me,
yeah.
but we dated in college. So that was
And
that.
everybody gets all judgy pants about you haven't been married and what's wrong with you and you're screwed up, all that stuff. Trust me, I had all that going on in my head. But we met 27 years ago at work, and we dated on and off for 3 years. And I broke it off because my parents didn't support biracial marriage, and
Mm.
I was not strong enough in myself to stand for us. And so we parted ways. He got married, got divorced. I'd been in and out of relationships, engaged twice, right? And then we reconnected, and we tried 3 or 4 different times over the span of like 8 or 9 years to get back together. And either I was ready and he wasn't, or he was ready and I wasn't. And it just, I got to the point where I remember our last time meeting, not this time, but the time before, I remember saying, we love each other. I just think we're supposed to be friends. It doesn't feel like this is supposed to work out. And then I ended up getting into, 1 or 2 relationships, and and then after this last one, I knew that all of my romantic karma was settled. My whole life has been about settling my romantic karma, and I had so many severe experiences so that I could right the wrongs that I had done and to learn what I needed to learn. And so we reconnected, and I took him out for his birthday. And we realized, I remember saying to him, I can't imagine you not in my life. I can't. And then we went out again, probably about 3 months later, and we were at dinner, and all of a sudden I started to talk with him, and I said two sentences, and then I had an out of body experience. My guides took me out of my body, and I just purged. I just purged, and then I came back into my body, and he's looking at me. I go, "What just happened?" He said, "You just opened up my heart again." And I was like, "Okay,
So you don't remember what you said to
it's
him?
time."
It just,
Nope. No, I'm not. I wasn't supposed to. It was just all. It was just
oh,
truth that came out.
wow. I'm like so
And then
many
that started
chills.
everything.
Oh,
Yeah. So we got engaged 7 weeks later. Married 7 months later.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
magic number was 27 years too. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Were you
It's just
local
we.
to each other?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
lived in
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
town?
Yeah, for sure. And we just have felt like we've been together for lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. And
Yeah.
I always knew I was meant to have love. And I knew that at some point I would get married because I would find the right person. But my husband, whose name's Sydney, he's always been in the background with every man I've dated. I would say, Sydney wouldn't do that. Sydney wouldn't say that. Sydney
Mm.
would definitely do it. He was always there, and I didn't know
Wow.
until the right time, until
Yeah.
I had finished what I need to finish and he was ready. And then boom, it was like that. So I say
Yeah.
to people, it's like, use my story as something that is inspiring, that I'm 54. Um, and look, love comes at the right time as you get right with yourself. When you're
Yeah.
good with who you are and being alone and independent with a full life, and you've learned everything you've needed to learn, God puts the biggest blessings in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I felt with my guy, call him my guy. He's the only person I have ever felt. Well, I will say there's an exception is my college roommate. Two of them I can like they see through me. They can answer, they
Yeah,
can
he
they can
gets
they
you.
can speak what I can speak. But in terms of a male, he was the only person that I felt could like it was like he could read my mind. He could look in
Right.
my eyes and see my soul. That's what it felt
Yeah,
like.
it's the same
Felt like.
thing. It truly is a soul connection, and people feel it's palpable, the love, and so it's like I settled for all my life in all these other relationships where all these men were conflicted about being with me because of their own shit, and it's like that was one of the hugest lessons I had to learn is never to settle, and I didn't,
Yeah, that's one of
and
my
here I
favorite
am.
favorite things to say is stop settling
Yeah.
for the life you don't want. But a lot of people don't
Oh,
realize even that they're settling. They're in this
right,
place of just trying to convince themselves that everything's okay.
right. And you're settling when you're not at peace. So anything other than uh, peacefulness, you're settling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if you truly want the dreams that you say you want, right, it's so important to know thyself and be so certain and comfortable with yourself that you know anything, any person, anything that you do is only going to amplify where you want to go and what you want.
Yeah. I love that word, amplify. Yeah. And so what about those shit talkers that didn't want you to marry him? Are they accepting of the situation now? Do they realize the love that's there and are they okay with that?
Oh, they are so in love with my husband. He
Oh,
is so much a part of the family, and uh, they there once they met him, there was no question. There were
yeah.
just certain members of my family. My father has passed. My mother's still alive, and it was really my parents. It had nothing to do
Mhm.
with my siblings
Yeah.
because they were happy as all get out that I was in a relationship and happy. So, and thankfully, my mom came around, and she's 85. She had to work through a lot of
Yeah.
old beliefs, and
Hmm.
thankfully we have such a diverse family. My sister and nephew are gay. We have divorce. We have every kind of thing in our family. Transgenders, a nephew down the way, and so it's like, look, this is how life is now. It's
Yes.
diverse,
Yeah.
and Love is love is love.
It's a
That's all I
different
say.
world we live in today.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
it's not
So I
antiquated
think,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. That's great. I'm so happy for you.
thank you,
So
thank you.
yeah, so are you now the pandemic hit? I know
Yeah.
with a lot of people who had brick and mortar businesses, that was a real challenge. So did you continue to do your therapy
Oh,
online? How did
yeah,
that?
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it was interesting because Spirit had me give my notice to vacate to the office that I was renting in January. I moved out 45 days later, and then 2 weeks later, the pandemic hit. So I was already set up to work through Zoom and work through phone. That's how beautiful, that's how Spirit works. It's just the coolest thing. And
It's
I
amazing.
love working mobily. I just love it. It's great.
So can you share uh what's one of the most fascinating kind of channelings that you've done? I just to tell you, we chatted a bit because we hadn't met before I hit record, but I didn't tell her this. Uh, and I always get so excited to talk to mediums, but I connected with my dad a year ago. My dad
Mm,
died in 2007, and I did it for my mom because my mom did an episode about it a while back. And if you, my regular listeners have probably heard the story several times, but it was just so amazing. But I did it for my mom because my mom, once my dad died, kind of died too, but she's still alive. It's the saddest thing. But I thought, well, maybe if she knew because she doesn't believe in any of this woo woo stuff. And so maybe if she knew that he was around, he was still here, he was still, and that when she passed, she would reconnect with him because that's what I believe. And so
mm,
I didn't realize how much I would get out of the experience.
mm.
And my grandmother came too, because just like you say, before a little prayer, the medium that I used, who I know I met through my business, is she said I ask whoever wants to come and join the conversation to
Yeah.
come. And my grandmother, who was a very dysfunctional alcoholic, and she wanted to talk to my mom too. It was like,
Mm.
I mean,
It's amazing. It's
why more people don't
amazing.
do this? It's
I
like,
know. So healing. It is
yeah,
so healing. And anytime I've given a mediumship reading, I'm amazed at what comes through and how helpful it is. I had one that stands out is I was reading for a male client of mine whose mother passed of cancer, and I said, "Okay, come on, use me." And she was right behind me, and she had her arms. She was as if she was standing behind me, had her arms, hands on my shoulders, and she was giving me the information that there's no way I could have known that was specific to him. And he's like, that sounds just like mother. Oh my God, she used to say that. And she gave him some very, very important messages. And it was as if the weight of grief had just been lifted and thrown away for him. And that's the goal of those readings. It's like the goal is to start the healing for grief, even though grief is lifelong. The misconception about grief is that it leaves you at some point or it ends. And it's like, no, it does not. The severity of the pain changes, but just knowing that a stranger can connect with somebody that you have loved so dearly and and really shares accurate information, it's there's nothing better than that. And I've had that happen with me and my daddy, and it's been so confirming. My daddy works with me a lot. He'll come around. When we were little kids, he would wear brute cologne. That's an
oh
old
yeah,
cologne,
my
and
boyfriend
he
in
would
high
wear.
school wore that.
Yeah,
I loved it.
yeah. And so the way my daddy shows me that he's around is he'll come around on my left and I'll just smell his cologne.
Oh,
And he would work with me with clients and he would hang out with me when I would be writing and creating and he would just be with me. So it's been a while since I have felt him. Um, and that makes me sad, but I know, especially doing the work that I do, and I know that he's visited it. I don't question any of it anymore. But I agree with you. People really should seek out qualified mediums to heal. And I'm not somebody that yammers on about that word. The healing word is it's been used too much, and I don't really feel like people need to heal, even though I just said they can heal. Rather, it's more of having a completed experience, right? So I use the completion instead of heal, because everybody's already healed. They just, as a human being, they have they have holes in their hearts, right? And they need to kind of fill that up. So a good intuitive or medium reading is just so good.
How do you feel that you've changed uh, internally in now that you're married? I mean, I think you as you were saying, you had already found yourself and
Yeah,
had a relationship with yourself and an acceptance and a love for yourself, which I think everybody should do before they pursue something else, because a relationship will never solve
sure.
that for you.
Yeah,
And that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody. So yeah, so how does this marriage, as you to use your term, amplified your ability to be your best self and to like, live from a place of, passion from inside and outside?
yeah. There, you know what? For my entire life in any relationship, I never felt safe. And that was for two reasons. One, I wasn't safe within me. And the second is that I always felt that the men that I dated didn't want to move forward with me. And it
What was the
wasn't that I
first thing
was a
you said?
screw
I
up.
think you cut out for a second.
I that I was safe. I was not safe within me, and
Got
that
it.
these people were conflicted or not all in, right? So that's why none of them ever worked out. They just weren't all in, and I felt the conflict within them. Um, but I'll tell you what, being married to my husband is something that at this point in my life, because of everything I've been through, I appreciate so much more about being in love and having a real partner who he knows me up, down, left, and right. I mean, and the soul, seeing each other's souls, that's exactly the way it is. He's absolutely my best friend, my most important champion, all of that. And being with him, when you have a love that is right, and when you're with the right person, there's never enough time to be with them. And there's such joy and freedom in being who you are. And you couldn't ever do anything, yes, outside of, God forbid, cheating or lying or killing somebody, which most people don't do. There's such a sense of safety that I could be as vulnerable and fallible as I am, and I am this in the safest place ever. And again, when you're with the right person, my daddy used to talk a lot about, and he was a psychologist, very very gifted psychologist, clinical psychologist, and he would always talk about creating a sanctuary with your mate. And the sanctuary is where the two of you are so protective of yourself. Very interesting to bring in Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan. People knew the love that they had for each other. You could see it, you could feel it, and they came before anything else. And their children often would say that, to the detriment, though, that they lived their life, which was we always felt second to their relationship.
Yes, I felt like that with my parents, but yet they loved each other. They were soulmates.
Right.
Yeah.
And you had that as a role model, right? So
Hmm.
so to be able to create sanctuary with your mate means that you are vulnerable and you're honest and you're transparent and you forgive and you don't hold grudges and you work on your shit. Like the right mate will pull all of the shadow stuff out so that you are face face forward in it and helps you grow and learn. And so that's what I knew I wanted. That's what I had grown up seeing. That's what I knew I was capable of having. And so that's what we have. And he's that same way too. But we laugh. We have so much fun. We have so much fun, and we trust each other implicitly.
Yeah, it makes me think of the way you're describing your relationship is that you have this support system that will never fail you, right?
Yeah,
That is what a
yeah,
lot of people don't have.
you
That
don't.
it's not necessarily, safety is one thing, but this is like knowing what your full potential is. Like my husband saw my full potential before I ever saw his,
Oh,
or
yeah, for
before I ever
sure.
saw mine for myself, and I saw his. before,
Yes.
because when we got back together, I said, "You're the man I always knew you could be." Because he was a little bit of a gallivanter. And so in that sense, it was like I knew you could be a good man to me and to the and be a committed man in a marriage, but he didn't,
Right.
when we first dated, he didn't want that. So like
Right.
the having that support system that somebody believes in you more than you believe in
Ooh,
yourself is
yeah, it's
powerful.
100%.
Is
It is, and
powerful.
that's
And
what
people don't
allows you
have
to,
that.
yeah, it's very
Yeah.
difficult to find because a person has to, in order for souls to meet in to me in the right way at the right time for the right fit, each of you has to be prepared. And so if you haven't emotionally matured or psychologically matured or physically grow, there are things that we have to learn from in order to be prepared for the blessings, right?
Ugh,
And
love
so
that.
if you haven't cleaned up your side of the street and you think you want this great, glorious, wonderful marriage that your soul knows you deserve, then you're not going to get it because your street's dirty. And so when you clean up your side of the street, you align with a vibration that's so much higher, that calls in so much better and so much more. That's when you align with what's meant for you, even though everything along the way is meant for you so that you can learn, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that was the case for me because I know what I've been through romantically, and and I knew that last relationship I had, I knew I was done. I knew it. Spirit told me, "You're done. You learned." Right? And so then it was just a matter of time before I realized, holy crap, Sydney's it.
Yeah, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
You know what I love about you? I love that you, you clearly you found love because you were engaged, but I love that you never married because it just somewhere you knew it wasn't right.
It
And I
was
don't know,
hard.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if you were aligned at that point yet, but
Nope.
so many people, like I got married knowing that I had doubts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just pushed through because I wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids. He checked
That.
all the boxes.
Yeah.
And
That.
yeah,
That.
yeah.
People are so driven by the dream
Mm,
and the fantasy and not the reality that when you get to a point with yourself, when you have a self respect that cannot be knocked down, then you will know when you are settling. You will know, and it will haunt you. And it haunted me because I knew. But I thought, oh, well, maybe with this one, maybe with that one, right? But you get to a point, especially in your 50s, and you know this, where the things that you thought mattered don't matter anymore. And your values shift, the priorities shift. And it's like, you know what? I've gotten this far and I've learned this much. I am sure as heck not going to give up anything at this point unless it's exactly what I want. I'm not going to look the other way again. I'm not going to stay in a relationship where I know there's inner conflict with the guy that I'm dating when they definitely don't want what I want. Hell no, no more. So it's only when I got really serious and committed to my standards and what I valued most was I able to not settle and keep going and going and going until I got to a point where I, without a doubt, knew this was it. There's no question in my mind, and it didn't matter to me, even if the worst case scenario was that my entire family rejected me. I knew that this ship was sailing and it was moving
yeah.
forward. So when
Yeah.
you get that clear, and you promise you have this sense of self-integrity where it's like, I will not live a life that is fraudulent or not exactly the way I want to. There's a commitment that you have versus an interest or desire or a hope,
Hmm.
and it's different. And I'm sure all of your listeners know the difference between being in a commitment moment versus being in a hopeful moment. Doubt creeps in when you hope because you're not certain that what you want is absolutely going to happen. But the commitment creates certainty. I'm so clear on what I want. I'm so clear on who I am. It can't not happen. That's what I've always held on to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. So good. So many thoughts are going through my head. What should I say first? But what I think the thing that came up for me when you were talking about that was that when I got to the point of knowing that I had to change, so it was like divorce and disappoint all these people, like my parents, his parents, my kids, all that, who are grown adults and had, opinions about everything at that point. And, or like chase a dream, chase a future that was a total question mark. And I decided that if I stayed in the wanting or being afraid of disappointment, it was going to be a life that I ended up regretting at the end. And
Yep,
I knew that it became a more of I'm more scared to not do it than to do it.
exactly. That's the driver.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I will tell you, and I think this is true of a lot of people who are older. Now I was 47, but
Yeah.
I remember feeling like, and people don't want to be alone. People don't want to be alone. So I would rather be in this shitty. Well, and again, it wasn't that shitty. It was just like, I know there could be more, but that's a question mark. So I'd rather stay where I know it's okay.
Safe and comfortable.
And so I
Yeah.
decided I would rather be alone than, it was at that point where I was like, alone is better than feeling alone
Yeah.
where I
That is
am.
the worst feeling ever is you're in a relationship and you feel alone and lonely. It is more painful to me to be in that situation than to be single and going out and dating and having fun and my freedom and independent. I can do whatever the hell I want when I want. Like to me, that's awesome. And I had so many years of that. But you have to understand that the universe brings you to a peak point, a pivotal point, where you get to consciously decide the quality of life you're going to live, and the universe will push you and push you and push you to the edge until you decide to claim yourself. Either that or the universe blows shit up in your life because you haven't
Yes,
taken the chance, right?
exactly.
So
Yes.
you get to a point where things are intolerable. It's like squeezing. You're standing in between two walls, and the universe is like, "Well, if you ain't getting out, I'm gonna squeeze you out of this," right?
Yeah.
And you're like, "Holy crap, I can't breathe. Let me get out." Well done, right? The
Yeah.
universe is like, finally. And so this is how we learn. And that took a tremendous amount of courage for you to do that, knowing very well you're breaking up a family. People will be divorced because of their images of how things need
Yeah.
to be. But you chose you. And if people can continue to choose themselves in a way that allows them to grow, knowing what's right for them, if we listen to that part of ourselves, that soul led intuitive voice, there's never a wrong choice, ever. It
Yeah.
just
And
may
I
not
think,
turn out the way you want to, but
yeah.
it's not a wrong choice.
Yeah. And, I feel I chose me, but yet I also believe because I always wanted the best for my kids
Of
and,
course.
I held on to the belief that they would learn from me to always go after their happiness.
That's
If
wonderful.
I could put a positive spin on this,
Yeah.
it was that they
Yeah.
were watching me pursue my happy, and I would
That's
never want
beautiful.
them to stay in a marriage that they didn't
Right.
think could give them that.
I think most people don't think about that. The fact that here you are as a role model, and if you role model misery and complacency, that's what your children will learn. It's what do you want to teach your children, no matter what age they are. The older they get, the more open you can be. Here's why. This is what I want for you. Here's what I know about life. I don't want you to make the same mistakes. It's there's no better way to parent than to show them what is in your best interest, what makes you happy, what lights you up, what real love is,
Yeah. Yeah.
than to choose yourself
Yeah.
and choose
Yeah.
to be
And
loved.
I think that's the point that I want people to understand is that we feel so guilty for wanting something for ourselves, but think about what you're really doing that's affecting others. And if you did
Now,
something
here's the
different, yeah.
thing. People wouldn't feel guilty if they if you could make decisions without the fear or worry about being judged. knowing that everybody judges people all the time, whether it's good or bad. You will always be judged doing what you're doing. If your hair doesn't look right, or if you look too old, or look too fat, or too tall, or sound crazy, or get divorced, or marry 6 times, judgment is everywhere. And how do you move forward in spite of that, in the face of that, towards your happiness? It's people always know what's best for them. But that's why when I work with people, I tell them there's no I don't know when you work with me. There's no form of it. You need to throw that in the trash, because you do know. And when your feet are put to the fire, or God forbid, I use metaphorically, if I held a gun to your head and counted to 5 and I said, I'm shooting now, you would know the answer. And
Yes.
that is a graphic thing, but it's very, very true. It works all the time.
Yeah.
Or if you flipped a coin and you before you did that, you were at a point of, I don't know what to do. How do I make this decision? And you flipped a coin, you knew which decision, which option was heads or tails. Your soul would give you the heads up about which side you wanted it to land on. So
I
everybody
love
knows
that. I
what
love
works,
that.
what doesn't work, what fits, what doesn't fit. And it takes a lot of courage to choose for yourself.
Yeah.
But it's like the more that you do that, then you become a happier human being.
Yeah. And I love the judgment thing too, because it's so true. And
Everywhere, all the
the
time.
way somebody judges you today is not the way they're going to judge you tomorrow. And if you follow your heart, guess what? They're going to come around.
They're going to see that.
Yeah.
Right. It's exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That's the certainty piece for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, I could go on forever.
It was fun. I like it.
I
It's
know.
good.
So maybe we'll be able to hang out in person sometime
You
soon.
got it. For
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
For
So
sure.
thank you so much. And yes, I want to just end with, do you have a favorite quote, or I like to ask, what does living a second half spark life mean to you?
Yeah.
How would you like
So
what would you like to leave the listeners with?
I can answer those 2 questions. One is, my quote is that I say at the end of my podcast every time is, always live intuitively. Trust your gut.
I love that.
And living a sparked second half of life to me means that I am living in a sense of freedom, that I can choose whatever I want, whenever I want, and that I always have my back, and I can speak my mind, and I'm comfortable in my skin, and I'm a constant student. I teach, but I'm a constant student, and I have become more and more aware of everything outside of me being just evidence of how well or not well I'm living in my world. And so I get to learn from everything all the time. And to be able to help women step into their confidence is like, that makes me so happy. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So yeah, always live intuitively.
Yeah. And I totally forgot. Well, of course, I always do an intro after the fact, but Janis calls herself the intuitive therapist. And don't you have a book? You wrote a book?
Yes, I wrote a book called The Intuitive Therapist. My podcast is called the Intuitive Therapist Podcast. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Good branding. All right.
Yes.
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 Well,
Wonderful.
Thanks so much for being with me and spending this last 40 minutes with me. I loved it. I hope your cat's better.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Living Your Spark Second Half podcast. If you'd like to watch my guest interviews, you can find the video version of this podcast on my Not Your Average Grandma YouTube channel. Also, you can check out what I have going on at the moment by going to my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com, or find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you like this episode, please mention it to a friend, and don't forget to leave a review so I know the topics you like best and can bring you more of that content in upcoming episodes. Last but not least, remember to always listen to that inner voice that will never steer you wrong, and make living from the most sparked place possible your biggest priority. When we do that, we make the world a better place.